work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I have been working in participatory action research, community-led participatory action research with some of the folks that will be presenting with me today on 2 NSF AZL awards since it's almost been 10 years that we've been doing this work together. Really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you. So glad that you could join us. Makeda.
Greetings. Hi, my name is Makeda Cheatom, and I'm the Executive Director of the WorldBeat Cultural Center in Balboa Park, Kumeyaay Native American Territory in San Diego, California. And I'm a co-PI for the Noise Project and was a community advisor for the ECF project.
Thank you so much. Bobby.
Yes, I'm Bobby Wilson. I'm a first-time co-PI of the Noise Project. Our focus has been on equity, diversity, and inclusion, has been at the core of the PAR. As a community-based organization, we are in the community for the community. And the Noise Project has been at the center of our work. We at Metro Atlanta Urban Farm believe that science is everywhere and it must be studied by those who have the power and privilege, but it also must be given equal share for those who live in marginalized and underserved communities. And equity and diversity should be at the center of the science work. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Phyllis.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phyllis Turner. I live in Metro Atlanta. I have spent almost 30 years in education in rural and urban, marginalized and underserved communities. I've been with the Noise Project for almost 3 years now as a community science collaborator and as a community coder.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you, everyone. So the way we're going to run this panel is through a Q&A. We have some very basic questions. And I encourage others, all of you to, if you have additional questions, to please put them in the chat. We will also try to leave some time at the end for a Q&A. But the first question is what are the key opportunities for doing participatory action research or community-led research, and why do you do it? So should we start? Does anyone want to start from the panel?
This is Bobby. And,
Perfect.
and what I would say, what's at the core of the work that we're doing is the community. And what make our project, the Noise Project, unique is that we have 4 co-PIs, first-time co-PIs of a project of this magnitude from the National Science Foundation. And we all live in the community and we work in the community, and we are very much a part of the community. So, which opens up a whole lot of different perspectives from our viewpoint, because we see it from the community perspective. And one thing that I asked of this project before we started is that we wanted to make sure that we got more than a report out of the Noise Project. Because so often they come in, large institutions come in, they study us, they give us a gift card for taking surveys, and we wanted to get more than that. And I'm pleased to say that the Noise Project has given us much more than a gift card and a report that was set on the shelf that many of the people that we work with will never get an opportunity or a chance to even see it. Thank you.
I can go next. I think Bob said it so well. There are many reciprocal benefits for academics and for the community to work together. For us in academia, the benefit is that we can make our work more meaningful, more useful, and more impactful by working alongside of the community. And in participatory research, we bring their input from very early on in shaping the direction of where we go and how we spend our time and energy. So without doing it with them, it is very likely that we could put our energy and effort into the wrong direction. So regardless what the outcome of our work is, whether it is a publication or a translated practice or policy, or even if the outcome is an entrepreneurship idea, when we work together with the community and when our work is informed by their knowledge and by their experience, we can ensure that the work we are doing is good and is meaningful, and we have used our time well.
Thank you. Phyllis, you put a comment in the chat. I wonder if you could just talk about it a bit.
Sure. So I just wanted to share an example of what we do in community coding. So as Bobby was talking about the bringing in the community and the diverse perspectives to the research, as I was listening to his answer, I just added what we might hear or read from his answer, which would be community diverse perspectives. He talked about inclusion, exclusion, the benefit of working together, the equity, inequity, and from the codes that we would share collectively around his answer, then we would seek to arrive at a consensus on whether those codes actually apply. And if those codes apply, then we would move on to the next answer. It's just an example of how we code. And from Rana's answer, I was going to add that one of the things I heard from her answer was collaboration, because she talked a lot about collaboration. And so that might be a code that we would use with her answer.
And just to add to Phyllis's and Bobby's responses, I want to say that at least in our experience over the last close to 10 years in working together in research and in qualitative research, but in the entire research process, the community has led in the entire research process from writing grant proposal all the way to formulating questions, understanding, collecting the data, which increases trust, to analyzing and coding the data, like Phyllis is talking about, to interpreting and disseminating. But I would say that for me, the thing that's been in my face has been that it becomes better science. It becomes more, there's more perspectives that come to light. There's more more relevance to the work, and it also allows for us to take on racism and injustice head on, because there's a history of injustice and oppression in science, and it's easy to sort of brush by it and not face it. But as part of being in a project that is community led, we can't do that, and so it really becomes front and center, and that's been a really, I think, key part of the work that we've done together.
Thanks, Karen. Richard.
I just echo the sentiments of everybody that's already spoken. I guess for me, it's really a value proposition. It's about thinking about knowledge very differently than conventional social science that uses a different set of criteria. For me, if the knowledge does not include stakeholders that are affected by the very problem you're looking at, then that's problematic. And if it's not actionable or used by those stakeholders, then it's problematic. And so for me, the opportunity when in higher ed or other organizations or in communities, knowledge can be generated and applied in multiple spaces. And so, that's for me, you can think about it in terms of its critique of conventional social science research in higher ed. But I think about it as much more broadly that knowledge is happening in a variety of different spaces. And so this process can be utilized really by anyone as long as it has deep stakeholder inclusion and that the knowledge is generated is actionable, it's used in some way and then revised. So it's about the process. The only other thing I would just say is it's also about the criteria we use for evaluating the quality of knowledge. And so often in higher ed, it's about epistemic, to use a funky word, criteria. So like, is it established causality? Is it generalizable? Is it replicable? Is it reliable, right? Sacred criteria. PAR questions those criteria, even the source of how those criteria were developed. For me, it's really very much about non-epistemic, so relational criteria. It's all about the quality of the relationships that have been developed as well. And that's often not considered in the criteria we use for evaluating how knowledge is generated and applied. So it takes a lot of thinking, right? Generating those criteria with stakeholders that you're working with.
I think that's really helpful because I think, in qualitative work, we're often using different kinds of measures, right? So reliability and generalizability are not necessarily goals of in-depth interpretive research. But I do think, some of the goals, whether it be actionable, right, and whether stakeholders are involved in the degree to which they are involved, not just in generating knowledge, but in generating questions, I think is a big shift. And so, Richard, I know, I've heard a couple of different terms used. And so I was wondering if you all have perspectives. I know Karen and I were talking at the very beginning that we could have a whole talk just on terms, but you use the term PAR, Richard, and I know some people in our audience might not be familiar with that. So could you explain it briefly or define it, and then perhaps talk a little bit about how it relates to community-based participatory research, or I think Karen used the term community-led research. That'd be great.
I don't know, yep, I'm not muted. So great question. So there are multiple lenses for thinking about participatory action research. And when I started this work in the late 90s, I was acquainted with some folks that had created a network here at Cornell called the Participatory Action Research Network. And it was nice because I was questioning whether or not I wanted to think about higher ed as a place where you could engage in social change work. And so I found a home within this group, and they were using participatory action research as an umbrella term. But then as I got more deeply involved and with some of the members of that group, I realized there's a significant history behind PAR in a variety of different countries where some people call it participatory research or action research in that particular group. They had various distinctions. Some focused more on the action that comes from it. Some focused more on the participation, particularly in resource limited settings where the voice is incredibly important and representation, where there isn't representation or voice in conversations around research. So there's also Southern PAR, so a lot of work that had been done in Appalachia, also in India, in South America. So there's Northern PAR. All of these are just different historical iterations of thinking about research, the research process that includes stakeholders that are affected by the very problem throughout, whether it's the problem definition, the methods that are chosen, the questions that are asked, the analysis, and so on, the coding to the point that's already been made. So I don't know if that if that helps. I like the umbrella term because I often enter into community. The first step for me is understanding the lenses from which people understand what they know, how they use knowledge, how they think about knowledge. And so I like the sort of this umbrella term, but over the years, the community-based, community-led, community-driven have also entered into the conversation. I know Karen has a pretty specific way of thinking about community-led, so I'd be interested in your lens, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's the terms do matter, but it's what matters more is perhaps just the action that goes around it. I think for us, and Bobby, Makeda, Phyllis, Betty can talk a little bit more about it, but for us, community leadership. I think we've all been exposed to the let me get some feedback from the community kind of approach, or an approach in which the community really isn't the community is there, but isn't an integral part of the research itself, of the decision making, of the analysis. Every day when we get together in our project to code, we make decisions, and we make decisions that will impact the results of our study. And unless community is there and community has an equal say in having discussions and in coming to decisions about how we look at the data, then the results are going to be very different. Also, just in perspective, in the questions asked, in the interviews, when interviews are being conducted by community, it's a very different approach than when they're being conducted by institutional individuals associated with institutions. And so I think it's the community-led aspect of it in the research is something that sometimes is missing. It's there maybe in the programming, but not in the research aspect of it. And I think for us, having community co-PIs like Bobby, like Makeda, and folks like Phyllis involved, in everyday decisions, and the entire project has just been really, I think, life-changing in terms of the way that we work and in the way that we prioritize the work that we're doing. So
And
that's
yes,
why we use community-led so much.
yes, like Karen said, that, it's a process that we co-create, from the bottom up. We're involved with leadership planning, determining the questions, we co-create everything, so it's so important that the community is not used as guinea pigs, and there's trust and transparency. So that is very important if a community research organization is going to work with a dominant cultural organization, because there's not trust in the community. We have to build that trust.
So I want to add to what Makeda and Karen said, and key word that was mentioned earlier is knowledge. And we feel like there's a whole lot of knowledge within our communities. And a lot of times when large institutions come into our communities, they come in with the attitude, I know exactly what you need. And that's not all the time is exactly right. We know some of the things that we need as well. And seeing that goes back to a seat at the table from start to finish. Before you start to study our community, give us a seat at the table. And as you go through the process of studying our community, let us remain at the table. And that brings about a sense of equity, diversity, and inclusion from start to finish. And then let's don't even talk about the language that the large institutions use. When you use language that our community don't understand and don't speak, then you totally out of our league. We created these workbooks, Partnership for Impact, and these books are available, and it's in basic language that both large institutions can understand and the community that understands it real clearly. So we're not, as community-based organizations, we are not talking over the community head, but we are also able to find that level playing ground so that we all can work together. And one of the key parts of what we do, and Makeda mentioned it, is co-creation. And that is so prevalent and important to the work that we do. Thank you.
I shared the booklets, links to the booklets that Bobby was referring to here. And again, I want to emphasize, I think one of the things that I think is quite different in terms of the way in which we work is we work together in just like Richard said, in a relational way. We at the center of our work is working agreements that we repeat, that we refer to, that we've co-created, and that we come back to every day, and non-negotiables in research. And one of those non-negotiables in research, again, that we've created together is, communities get to hear the results first. Community get to be part of the results. They're very clear non-negotiables. So this is an equivalent of an IRB process, but it belongs in the community. And the community says, look, if you're not going to follow these rules in terms of how we want this work to benefit our community, then you can't do it here. We also have a decision-making process. So it's crystal clear who's making the decision. If it's a little fuzzy, it's really easy for the institution to say, well, we talked about it and this is the answer. With a decision-making process, it's very clear how we get to the answer because we've created that process. And so it's very, very transparent. So the process really matters. So.
You're talking about impact, making an impact, research that changes the world. And that type of research is not one that just comes at the community, but it's one that is built with the community. That's the type of research that makes a difference. And what we learn is that to do good participatory collaborative research, actually we need to know qualitative research, qualitative methods, because that's how we can elicit information in larger body of information and learn how to then summarize it to the key messages. One of our students, undergraduate freshman students, is now on the call, Pauli Gabateso. He's on the call with us, who's doing this qualitative analysis experience when we have input from the community and the team at Cornell reads it, studies it, summarizes it, and takes the key messages forward. So qualitative research is important and goes hand in hand with participatory research. We have a project with us right now that has two arms, quantitative and qualitative. In the quantitative part, we are doing a randomized controlled trial. The project is about helping older people at home manage their medication so they don't miss a medication or don't take a medication by mistake. So in our randomized controlled trial, we are testing an intervention in the community. In the qualitative part, we are actually seeking input in the creation of this intervention. And it's so interesting to see how these two arms work together. And without the qualitative part, without the community part, how this randomized controlled trial could completely go wrong. Naturally, in a process of research intervention or randomized controlled trial, you want to simplify processes. So we have been told, it is important to only work with the communities who are comfortable with using technology, or it is more reliable to work with older people who have a cognitively intact caregiver at home. And as you imagine, based on the feedback we are receiving from the community, those people who actually don't have a caregiver at home, those people who are farthest from the technology need our interventions most. So working with the community and working with research, we are learning how to make maybe an alternative solution that can be researched, but is actually useful for dissemination and for moving research forward. So combining qualitative research, combining participatory research, and helping it inform and lead the research that we're doing really makes our work meaningful.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat about relationships and how it is, and whether or not you have to be of the community you're working with, and how you navigate those relations if you're not. It would be great to hear, Karen, perhaps Karen, how you found Bobby and Makeda and Phyllis, or how they found you. How do these relationships get established? I don't think you were a collard green farmer from Atlanta, but I could be wrong. So how do you build these relationships? Because there's this, and I'm also building on that. I'm also interested in timing, and because there are grant proposals and there are things that there's timelines for things, and relationships and trust, and those feel like they might be at odds with some of the timelines and structures that the university has kind of put on this. So it'd be great to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about our group. We are very, very diverse communities in that there are 15 different communities, and they're each very, very different one from the other. So there isn't one community here. It is many different communities working together. You know, we navigate that and part of the navigation has been in really focusing on process and on achieving equitable processes. And that has not been an easy process. It's taken us, I would say, you know, at least, you know, it took many years to come to the point where we came to our working agreements, we came to our non-negotiables. And in the last few years, one of the things that we really center is the white supremacy cultural characteristics, and really bringing them to light and avoiding them, and talking openly about them, and integrating them into the coding and into the work that we do. So having those conversations and really, you know, and I think developing the trust over the years is something that that is a constant work in process. And you're right, Lee, a lot of folks have said, well, you know, who has time for that? I mean, there's just no time. But, you know, you don't question, you know, the time that it takes, you know, to do, I don't know, bench chemistry, right? It's something that needs to happen. It's something that needs to have a primary focus, and for our project, really, it's been at the center. Process it has been at the center of the work that we do, it's not something that you do and check off the mark and say, okay, we've done that, let's move on. We do it every day when we get together and code. We build that trust and we continue building, and sometimes we break it and then we've got to work again. But I would love to hear Phyllis and Makeda and Bobby and Bede, your words in terms of how we work together and how we manage that.
Well, from just Bobby, from my perspective, we have built, I often refer to us as a hodgepodge baseball team coming together. And Karen has enabled us to melt into what I consider a championship team. And it is primarily based upon some of the pillars that we established early, like commitment and collaboration, trust and transparency. And so one thing from my perspective is that I have always tried to be real open in group meetings and in group settings and voicing my opinion in terms of the way that I've seen things. And oftentimes, Makeda and I have disagreed with each other, and we've seen things from a different perspective. And there have been times that she has won me over to her side, and there have been times that I've won her over to my side. And then there's been some neutral times where neither one of us have budged, but we continued to work on what we felt was very important. And if you look at the booklets that we produce, and I would suggest that you take a look at them. Karen put them in the chat so you can find them online and read them. And we've just taken these approaches and we've dealt with them up front and openly. And when there was some backbiting going on, as some kind of way it worked its way to the forefront, and we dealt with it openly. So I feel excellent about the relationship over the last 8+ years that we have been working together, and feel real positive that we are making tremendous impact within our communities. And I think the one thing that we haven't quite figured out yet is how do we disseminate this information into large institutions, so when the next round of grants are written, that there are other co-PIs that's coming out of the community that looks like us, or that looks like the community look. And I always say we don't want a Clarence Thomas at the table, we want a Thurgood Marshall at the table, somebody that's going to speak on behalf of the people and be the voice of the people. And that has always been my position, that I want to be the voice of the people. Thank you.
I would add to that that I think that I'm the newest one to the project, and what I've observed since being with the Noise Project and working in this co-created process is the importance of having respect for each other and being able to build a consensus based on common goals. And to that, what I heard Bobby say is, when you're able to work together in solidarity and mutuality, you may not necessarily agree because of a diverse perspective that you bring to it, but you realize that there's a common goal that's worth working towards. And even as Karen said, when bringing all of these communities together, you're going to slip up sometimes. Somebody's going to misunderstand something. You're going to misspeak because of your lack of sensitivity on an issue or language or something that you might use. Someone is going to misunderstand the intention of the words that you use, but being able to forgive and learn from those mistakes and not let those things divide you or pull you away from the core issue of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion for the communities that you're serving.
And I want to add to that, we are from different customs, different from the South. I'm, raised in California, more activist in certain different ways. We've learned to bridge, these differences because it was for the community. We learned to put all this conflict aside and bridge things together for the community, for the generations to come. and we learned from each other and grew together. And we learned trust and to have each other's back in these times. So, you know, that's a hard thing to do, that people put their egos to the side and for the community, bringing communities together as a whole. And that's what we are, communities. So if we can do it, you know, we feel that our communities and the dominant culture institutions could do it. And I've already started working with the dominant cultures and inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And these are the institutions that didn't even allow a people of color institution to be at the table. And like Bobby always says, we want to sit at the table, that we need that seat. So now with this, with being with the Noise Project and being an ICBO, we're able to make a move and put these issues out to the community and be at the head of the table, you know, in these diversities meetings with the institutions around me in Balboa Park. So this has really changed my life and the way I communicate with people.
I really appreciate hearing everyone's perspective on this, and thank you for sharing the documents. I'm really struck by the illustrations. I think do a tremendous amount of work in terms of talking about the power inequities between research institutions and community partners. And so, you know, along those lines, and, you know, this has to do with various, well, I was going to say challenges of doing this. And I know you have spoken to the ideas of process and the importance of getting community partners not just at the table, but sitting in the leadership positions, making them co-PIs on grants rather than just, you know, consultants or collaborators after the fact. At the same time, you know, the NSF gives research funds to research institutions primarily, right? They're just beginning to give them, I think, to community-based organizations. And so what are the other challenges? I mean, as if that's not enough, right? What are the other challenges that someone thinking about engaging in this kind of work really has to be aware of? Or what are the things that you all have encountered and continue to struggle with and in terms of doing this kind of important work?
I think one of the things that I have done from the offset is that how do we move large institutions like the National Science Foundation, and I also made note of your organization as well. How do we move organizations like that towards investing directly into the community? Because when I think about the $2.6 million that we got for the Noise Project and how much the large institution takes off the top, it becomes a challenge when it's only the crumbs and the crevices get to us at the grassroots level. And we're at the center of the work that is taking place. So one of the things that I have pressed the National Science Foundation on, and I would do the same thing for your organization, how do y'all move towards directly funding a Metro Atlanta Urban Farm or WorldBeat Center or one of the other two programs that we have that's co-PIs already doing the work in the community, and then allow us to hire the institutions to work with us on behalf of the research to kind of blend and merge those so-called haves and so-called have-nots together to equal the playing field. So that's one of my biggest challenges, to move the needle towards funding underserved communities directly through nonprofits like we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for mentioning a very important point. I want to add, from university perspective, one challenge we have is to encourage and support emerging professionals and future researchers and early researchers to be to continue to expand on this type of work. And the criteria that we put as institution on researchers and faculty, tenure track faculty, younger researchers are not compatible with community research. We ask for publications in high impact journals, that's good, but sometimes it can steer us away from a complex work that requires trust building, requires close work collaboration, and takes longer time to come to actual final products. And those can be difficult to build in create evaluation criteria for younger and early career researchers. I also want to add one more challenge, and that expands on what Bobby mentioned. Large institutions, institutions that set these criteria of success, that fund research, that set criteria for investigators to acknowledge the amount of complexity of the work that goes into participatory research and value and award those as opposed to more pure research. And that is a challenge today. Good news is that both are already changing and transforming, and there has been top-down and bottom-up efforts already. So we see now NIH and NSF shifting more toward this type of work. We see institutions like Cornell building criteria for early career researchers, for students, encouraging them, providing funding, providing grant funding, building institutions, building awareness from bottom up to encourage this land grant institution to better deliver on its promise to work closely with and for the community. At the end, I just want to say that's great that we are changing, and that's great that the world is changing, but I hope that this change becomes more significantly accelerated.
I would add to the conversation. I had the editor from the Georgia Department of Agriculture to come out and visit the farm the first thing this morning. And we talked about some simple research that Metro Atlanta Urban Farm is doing that could potentially save farmers on the scale that I'm on, hundreds of dollars per growing season. And what that means is it's something that they wouldn't have to go and buy because they could produce it themselves. On the first week in December, I got 150 county commissioners from across the country coming to visit Metro Atlanta Urban Farm. They're looking at how we are impacting people's lives in a positive way, how we are maintaining and sustaining green space in our communities, the research that we are doing with high school students as it relates to their science project. And so the work that we are doing is impactful, but it's never measured in the way that an institution would measure it, because we feel like it's something that we need to just be doing for the community to make life better. So I'll just share that with you. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to quickly add on the same, similar to what you brought up earlier, Lee, that the timeline that these grants give us is always too short. You know, especially if the relationship is just starting when the grant is starting. You know, if we get a chance, like we did a little bit with Karen, we kind of already had some sort of relationship prior to the grant, then it gives you at least a little bit of trust, at least from the community side, and say, well, we've had one successful project, you know, with them. Let's see what comes after. And the other challenge, of course, is always for the community to get buy-in for the research that they're doing, because a lot of times, you know, for us, we may not have those degrees in the field. We may not speak the language that is, you know, has been in these reports, in these studies, and so we're not, our knowledge isn't valued, and our expertise isn't valued. So that can be a challenge as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think, you know, there's a lot of different work in qualitative research in general to think about, again, whose knowledge, what kinds of things constitute knowledge. I personally am just struck by Phyllis's chats. We know in qualitative work, reflection, self-reflection is a really important aspect of that. And so Phyllis, it's been such a joy to have you, you know, coding our conversation today and putting that in. And I think that speaks to the level of reflexivity and just process that your group has really been working at. So I wanted to point that out as something that I really appreciate. If there are questions, I think we can open it up now from the group. You can put it into chat, or you can put it into, or you can raise your hand. But there's a lot of expertise here on this panel, so don't be afraid to be selfish and ask a question directly related to a research project or just something broader.
Lee,
yes.
May I add to the question you just asked about some of the key challenges of conducting PAR? And just from another perspective, building that trust, which is what we've talked about already, but encouraging communities to get past the fears and concerns of past injustices, inequities that span decades or centuries, so that we're willing to participate in research because we believe or trust that the potential for benefit to our communities. Also believing that large institutions can be transparent in the face of constant reminders, like day-to-day reminders of white supremacy that we read about and see in the media on a daily basis. That is a challenge. And the next part of that question is, how do we overcome the challenge? Well, when it comes to the process itself, it's the creditable voices that we add. Like in the Noise Project, we have junior CSCs, we have high school students who've been a part of the research process. And because of their lived experiences, they can communicate and disseminate across their communities what they are learning from their own research. And their voices are creditable. So one of the biggest things to overcoming that challenge is credibility.
Yeah, and Phyllis, I would add to that in terms of, we have seen the impact that the Noise Project has had on our young people. To give a couple examples is that we had a family that the daddy was a DJ, and he would come in and play loud noises, and their baby sister would be putting her hands over the ears. Nobody paid attention to that until one of the siblings got engaged and involved in the Noise Project. And when she called her father's attention to it, it stopped him from playing loud noises in the house. We had one kid that was in a shell, and because of the Noise Project, a junior CSC, Community Science Collaborator, it brought him out of his shell, and now he's a very outspoken person. So we had one young lady had never thought about applying to go to Ithaca, Cornell to school. Now she is in communication with the university in terms of wanting to go to school there because she has been involved and engaged in the NOAA's project. So when I say more than a report, we have really in the metro Atlanta area and in other parts of the country, we have gotten more than a report out of this NOAA's project. It has had tremendous impact upon our communities that we serve. Thank you.
So well said, more than a report.
Yes.
That's what it is about. It is a lot more than just a publication or a report.
I think another challenge that I can add is, and I think Phyllis talked a little bit about it as well, is credibility, right? Credibility in the larger scientific world. I know for us, we were presented that with that every day, and it's a real pushback. It's real pushback. So that's a huge thing. I see Makeda wants to speak up, so Makeda, go for it.
I was just gonna say that, you know, it's okay to be raggedy, you know. We're gonna come in, have challenges, and like I said before, just bridge those challenges. This is very new. It's a very different to bring the community into science research like this. And it's really, when I look at families and you bring in the my culture into science, they're so happy that they can be considered in science and not just in football or basketball, or, you know, we're bringing this to the community and they are hungry for it. We can be scientists, yes. Science is for all, you know, and that was Bobby's quote, but it is, and it's something. So they're included because they thought that science is just for the dominant culture, and they weren't smart enough to, you know, to be scientists. So this brings all our cultures into STEM science. And also, you know, with the conflicts, I mean, I know sometimes, you know, with white privilege, it scares people. It really does. But we could grow together. That's so important. We see so many things that are going on, but, you know, on the news and everything, but we learn to be, in this research, one people, because there's one aim, and that's to bring science to all our communities. Thanks.
This is my last statement right here. When we think in terms of par, we think in terms of golf, and we think I didn't beat the course and the course didn't beat me. But as marginalized and underserved communities, we've been in the bogey area so long, that's when the course keeps beating you. And as we move more towards par, then the dominant culture seems to want to take it back. And I'll use Georgia for an example, how they want to take away the rights to vote. How, and before, I can't take water and snacks to people that's standing long hours. I spent 6.5 hours a few years ago waiting to vote, me and my grandson. And I can't bring water to those folks that are standing in line for long periods of time. So as we move more towards par, we playing equal, then you want to regress and put me back in the bogey area. But I want to get to the birdie area where I'm actually making progress for my community, in my community. And with that said, I'm going to listen to what anybody else got to say. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Any other closing remarks?
I guess one thing I would say is, well, one, if anybody's interested in terms of sharing knowledge, over the years, because I had the privilege of working with a number of people who do participatory action research from different lenses, I had sort of an epiphany. I was like, wow, there's so many approaches to this. So I put together a document called Making Sense of PAR Approaches, and used to present that. It's been a while since I presented that, but I'm happy to share it. And it goes through challenges, it goes through the process, and it has a chart that distinguishes between conventional and PAR-like approaches. So I'm happy to share. I also have done a presentation on relational trust, and I'm happy to share that. It draws heavily from Parker Palmer's work. And I put together like references and strategies and things that you might think about with relational trust. The last thing I will say is, I think this work entails a lot of humility. And someone I think might have mentioned cultural humility, and I think that's key to this work.
Thank you, Richard. We would definitely take you up on those resources. If not, have you at another QuIRI seminar soon.
I want to say one thing. I want to thank Karen Purcell, for just having the guts to, go through all these different challenges, to make a difference in science, working with us, keeping us together, and even sacrificing a lot things that could affect her in many ways. So again, Karen Purcell, I want to thank you for all you've done for us. People of color, I can't, I don't understand someone from a dominant culture that would take so much time, because it takes time, for people to come into this challenge, of community research, and with people of color from different parts of the country. So, I wouldn't have known as much about science because I'm in arts, and I got into this with birding and black people birding, and understanding what it's like to be about birding, and then moving on to noise pollution, because I do sound, I do concerts, and I thought it would end there, but I got to just keep researching and growing. And now I'm with plants playing music, which is healing people. And some of the bioacoustic department at Cornell said, well, Makeda, you were ahead of, you guys were ahead of yourselves, because UCSD is doing that now. So working with sound from plants. So again, I want to thank all of you at and Cornell for being with us and with Karen Purcell on this project, because people of color would not realize that science is for all. Thank you, Karen. Love you.
Thank you, Makeda. Sciences are better because of you guys being in the sciences. It's the way it needs to be. You guys are an amazing team. It's a privilege to work with you all.
So with this, I would like to thank everyone on the panel and everyone who came today, and all to help us reflect and think about the ways that we do science, and the way that we can do science for all better, more inclusively, with greater justice. So thank you so much. And we'll be following up for more reports and links and ways that we can get these resources out to people. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Take
Thanks.
care.